Hi, I'm Patrick Manning at Black Desert Resort. We are proud sponsors of Beyond the Game. I recognize that wins aren't always measured by points. Scoreboards don't always define champions, but the story this athlete has to tell, it does. This is why Black Desert Golf Course is proud to sponsor Beyond the Game to share this inspiring story with you. Please enjoy.
You're listening to the Utah Checkdown Podcast. And now your host, Josh Furlong.
Welcome back to another edition of the Utah Checkdown Podcast. I am Josh Furlong, happy to be back with you guys for another week. It's been a busy week, so let's just jump right into it. But first, let's chat about our partners from Black Desert who are helping with the KSL.com Beyond the Game video series. The videos highlight various athletes and give an inside look into their life. Recently, we talked with former Utah offensive lineman Garrett Bowles about how a second chance at life allowed him to pay it forward to troubled youth. You can check out that video and many others on KSL.com. Black Desert is a new resort destination in St. George that features a championship Tom Weiskopf 19-hole golf course that combines a private club feel with destination resort golf amid lava fields and 360-degree vistas. Black Desert is changing entertainment in southern Utah, and they're just beginning. Black Desert, where remarkable is within reach, home of the Black Desert Championship PGA Tour. All right, so let's jump right into it. This has been fun. I think everywhere I go, the question has returned to, is Cam playing or not? So that's fun. I think it's an entertaining side note to the season. And, you know, I talked about this a little bit on Monday. There's been a little bit more that's taken place since then. But, we'll jump into that. So I was going to have a special guest join me today to talk, to help preview the Utah State game, but it didn't work out. The schedules didn't work out, so we're just going to be solo again today. But moving forward, I am potentially, got to get all the deals signed, having a special guest that will join me most likely weekly, if not most of the time. I'm pretty sure you guys will like who this person is and kind of give some insight on kind of Utah football and different things that way. So looking forward to chatting about that and seeing how that goes. But let's get into this week. So Cam Rising obviously is out. He got hurt at the end of the game against Baylor. As has been mentioned, he has a laceration on his hand. He also has a dislocated finger that has caused some issues. I don't believe that this is earth-shattering news to any of you that have been paying attention. But if you have not heard this is the situation we're in. So, this whole week has it's been kind of maintaining and trying to figure out where he's at. As far as this goes, he's not officially ruled out yet, but I would say he's more than likely not playing, which means that Isaac Wilson will become the starter this week. So that's it's been trending that way. Isaac has gotten a majority of the reps this week. The game plan is scripted towards him. There's always a possibility that Cam is available on Saturdays, so never say never. But I don't think that this is where Utah is going to try to pull an audible and not put Isaac in. So, Cam is going to take this week off. This will be an opportunity for Isaac to get a full week of game prep under him and get the majority of the reps and kind of go that way. So there's not a lot of this splitting reps, and Isaac's only getting that 20% that we talked about on Monday. This is him getting the full reps, the full 80% of those reps, and part of the game plan. So, earlier this week on Tuesday, we talked to Kyle Whittingham, and I asked him, if Isaac is the starter, who is the backup? Because there's been a lot of conversations about who it could be, kind of what's going on there. And Kyle was pretty definitive in that, and he said that Brandon Rose will be the backup quarterback for Isaac if Isaac is to start. And he said that both of them had good days, and I believe that, especially with Isaac. I think Isaac has done really well in practice, especially in fall camp. There were things that he was doing that had everybody amazed. So you can see the potential that he has. For Isaac, it's really coming down to executing it in the game, right? That's not really a no-brainer. This is a situation where, as a freshman, you feel comfortable out on the practice field. There's not a lot of stakes out there, right? Like obviously, like you're vying for that starting job or that backup job in his case, and so there is competition there. But at the same time, it's not one of those things where you know that if you throw an interception, that it's this life or death situation. This is where the game changes for freshmen, especially. And so for Isaac, it's not necessarily even a matter of a skill or talent or Andy Ludwig not wanting to give him some reps. It really just comes down to he has to execute. And he knows this, right? Like Isaac isn't shying away from that. He talks about it regularly. This is a kid that understands his situation. He's humble about it. But he's also confident. He understands that he can do it. It's just a matter of actually going out on the field and doing it. Now, with that said, there is some confidence that goes into a quarterback when they know they're the guy, right? You go in there, you're not coming in as a reserve situation. You're not getting thrown into the wolves, so to speak, where you're in this not ideal situation and you have to kind of make something out of it. That's kind of where we've been at with Isaac these first two games. First game, obviously, it wasn't quite that dire, right? Like I don't want to sit here and paint this picture that Isaac was thrown into some situation that it was like boom or bust. But I mean, he was still thrown into a tough situation that we've documented, 38 seconds left in the first half, and they're expecting him to kind of move the ball down the field. Wasn't anything too crazy about that. So, nothing there. Second half, yeah, you're going towards Isaac a little bit more, but it's still tough to be able to not get those full reps and understand what's going on. Still has to do some things to improve. That's that kind of stuff. Second game, obviously, he's thrown in a pinch. Cam gets hurt, has to get in there and do what he needs to. Utah's talked about how they went into preservation mode. Some of that is Utah not wanting to really give it up, but also just kind of helping Isaac kind of acclimate to the system, right? It's not like they weren't trying to give him opportunities. There were a few that he missed, but all in all, he handled the game very well. So now we're in a situation where he is the guy. And this is where I think a lot of people are going to make their impression of Isaac Wilson, fair or not. I think the tough part for him is he's going to be judged highly on this game. Now, that's not to say that he can't, if he has a bad outing, that it's not redeemable, but that's the nature of this position, right? You go into it as a quarterback knowing that you're going to get all the love and you're going to get all the hate. And unfortunately for him, he's being thrown into a situation where I believe, and I'm trying to check my data on this, and so I don't have full confidence on this, but I'm fairly confident that if Isaac is the starter, like we believe, that he will be the youngest player in Utah history to play under center. So this is a situation where, yes, he is going to get his first start, and he is going to be in a situation where he's had the full week of prep, where he knows what's going on. But it's not easy to just make all those decisions and say, okay, this is who Isaac is going to be, right? It takes time. You look at freshman quarterbacks all around. This happens even in the NFL. You saw this weekend with the NFL, all those freshmen, rookie, we'll call them the rookie, that's where they're at. But rookie QBs, they struggled. This is just the nature of where it is. You're moving up into a new system. It takes a few weeks to get into it. These are guys in the NFL especially, they've had a whole offseason. They've gone through the extensive training camps where this is their job, and they still struggle in that. Now, I get it. I'm not comparing the NFL to college, but it's a similar, uptick, right? Like you're going from high school, which, Isaac isn't shy about saying it's really easy to beat teams in high school. There's not that much talent, at least diversified throughout a team, that it's much easier to beat. In college, that becomes much more challenging because there's a lot more talent. In the NFL, it gets even harder. And so that's just kind of the nature of where these quarterbacks are. So you're going to see a guy that's going to go out there, and he's going to try to do his best to execute at the level that he wants to be at and Utah wants him to be at. Is it going to look the same as Cam Rising? I can't imagine it does. I think this is a situation where, they're going to be a little bit more conservative, but at the same time, I think he really does have the entire playbook at his disposal. He's run it. He understands it. This is a Utah State team that we'll get into a little bit more, that he's more than capable of being able to do this against. That's not to say that Utah State is just an FCS team type thing that where you can just absolutely, lights out and do everything. There are definitely opportunities in this system that Isaac can cook, we'll say, as the young kids say. But this is still going to be a tall task for him, right? It's not going to be easy, but it's also a great training ground for him to be able to get live reps. They have faith in him, and they believe in what he can do. Now it really is just him believing in that, which he does, and then executing. That's the real tricky part, executing to the level that they need it to be. There's going to be mistakes. I can already assure you of that, so don't go into this thinking that Isaac is going to be this perfect guy. I don't think anybody is, but this is a situation where, he's going to be able to kind of really showcase what he can do, and we'll see what happens. Now, with that said, if it all plays out the way that we expect, Cam Rising is expected to be back for the Oklahoma State game. Finger injuries don't always heal the way that you want them to. Earlier this year, I jammed my finger with my son playing basketball, and honestly, it still has some residual effect. And I'm not Cam Rising, and I'm not at a high-level athlete and everything. I don't have a training staff, so there are some advantages that he has, but I use that in the sense that, finger injuries just aren't that easy to recover from, especially if they're not healing the way that you want to. With this being on his throwing hand, that complicates things a little bit. But I think he's going to be in a way that he can do it, right? It's more just rest. This isn't his knee. This isn't anything that way. This isn't something where, it's a bait and switch. That's not to say that he might not go against Oklahoma State. I'm not trying to put that doubt in there. But, things happen. Finger injuries aren't always as easy as they appear, especially on your throwing hand. So we'll see how that goes. Wow, that's a lot to go with a quarterback, right? I know that causes some angst amongst fans. As somebody that had to report on whether Cam Rising was playing or not a lot last year, this is kind of bringing back some of that 2023 PTSD. But I think you should be optimistic, right? Be optimistic about Isaac Wilson getting the start. Be optimistic about where he's at. Knowing that there's tremendous upside with him. It's just a matter of him trying to execute it on the field. And that's going to take some time, right? Even if he executes at a high level on Saturday and torches Utah State, that obviously gives you optimism, but that's not who Isaac is. Whatever happens in this game, there's going to be a lot more development in his progress. So you can make sweeping decisions about Isaac this weekend, and nobody will do that by any means, because that's not how college football works. We're all very level-headed and think about everything. But this is a situation that it's going to be evolving. It's something that you're going to learn something about him, but more importantly, it's just an opportunity to see a new quarterback and potentially the future. Now, let me address the situation with Brandon Rose. So Brandon Rose, as of that moment on Tuesday, he would have been listed as QB2. This is him beating out Sam Heward for that spot. I don't know that comes as too much of a surprise, in the sense that Sam is still kind of acclimating to the system. Obviously hasn't been in there that long. We've talked about this, so this shouldn't be anything new. But Kyle didn't fully give his full support around Brandon. He said, but that could change. I don't know that it will, but when, if you get into a situation where, Isaac is injured, or he has to go out for a down, or Utah is winning by a lot, who do they actually throw in there? That's where it becomes a question. Brandon has, if you're going to go put him out and he's going to hand off the ball, I don't think they worry too much about that. The biggest issue with Brandon is that he still hasn't fully developed outside of the, you get your read, and, if that read isn't there, he has a harder time improvising. That's not to say he can't improve or that he hasn't improved. Quite honestly, I haven't seen any of his game outside of spring stuff. So like me saying this is just things that I've heard. It's hard to fully give you an understanding of what that is. But at the same time, the understanding is he's still struggling within that system to execute. Okay. That's why Kyle is so definitive with his answers about Isaac Wilson being QB2. He's not entertaining any situation where there is a QB3. I know there's some fans that want Brandon Rose to get a shot after what they saw with Isaac last week. The reality is Isaac is your best shot. And, you can decide whether that's good or bad. I personally think it's good because I think there's a ton of upside, and I think you've got a guy that's willing to take shots. It's just a matter of can he execute it at the level that he's at right now. Brandon is a different situation in the sense that he's been in the system. He, yes, technically understands the playbook, but if you're not able to perform at the level in practice, it's hard to be able to get to that level in a game. Once again, this isn't me saying that he's a bad quarterback. I'm just saying there's things that he needs to do to improve to give them confidence. The same goes with Sam Heward, right? Obviously, highly rated kid coming out of high school, 5-star kid. He's jumped around, and some of that is not his fault in the terms of like where he's been at. But now he's in a system where he's got to learn everything. He's trying to figure that out. Execution, yeah, he's done that at the FCS level, but now it's different trying to do it here in a complicated system that's not really conducive to a guy coming in a month before. If everything all goes crazy, I'm curious to see what happens if it was Brandon or Sam. Let's just hope we don't get to that level. The chasm is big between these quarterbacks in terms of Isaac and the next two. I think they fully believe in Isaac. He's in the film room a ton. He's trying his best to be able to do whatever he needs to. Isaac also presents them a great opportunity in the run game. If you like what Cam does or liked what Cam did in the past with his run game and kind of that moxie that he has, this is where Isaac can kind of be that guy. He can be the guy that can scramble a little bit more of a dual threat than Cam was. And so there's potential there where you can, roll out Cam or Isaac and QB keepers or whatever. Now, obviously, they have to be judicious in this in the sense that he is your quarterback, and if he gets hurt, that all the season goes haywire. So, I think you have to be careful on how you do that, but at the same time, that's kind of where it is between Isaac and these other quarterbacks. So, let's be done with quarterback talk. There's obviously more to this game, so let's jump into the Aggies. With it being an in-state school, I think it's a little easier for people to kind of understand a little bit what this team is like. That's not to say that everybody understands what's happening up in Logan, but I think it's a little easier than picking apart a team like Baylor where maybe you haven't watched them because they're not close by. So let's just jump in, but we're going to assume that maybe you don't know a lot of this stuff. I want to give you kind of a comprehensive look at who these Aggies are, because as much as this started out as a 22-point favorite game for Utah, that line is going to drop. Right before I got onto this podcast, Brett McMurphy tweeted that Isaac Wilson would likely get the start. So you're going to see the line drop a little bit, but it's still going to be high. This is still a Utah State team that can do some damage, and it's a team that really has nothing to lose in a lot of respects. They have an interim head coach after everything went down with Blake Anderson. We're not going to get into that nonsense. I'm not going to deal with that. But the reality is you have a team that they're going to try to do whatever they can to disrupt what Utah's trying to do. Obviously, they want to win. I'm not trying to say any of that kind of stuff, but they become a dangerous team because they have nothing to lose, right? Everybody expects them to not do well this year, especially in the situations that they're in. And so if they do well, that's kind of a surprise. They believe in themselves like any team should. Obviously, they're not put together in a way that is conducive to what's going on right now, simply with how things are shaken out. But still a good team, still some good players on this team that really should present Utah some problems. So let's look at some of this. Their first two games of the season, they beat Robert Morris, an FCS team, 36-14. Their starting quarterback, Petros, goes down. Bryson Barnes, you may be familiar with that name. He gets thrown in there, and he's back in his role as a starting QB. Goes 11 of 21 for 198 yards, 2 touchdowns, 1 interception. His QBR was only 70. It wasn't too high. He was thrown into the mix of it against an FCS team, and they still kind of struggled and needed to kind of get down to it in the late portions of the game to get a win. So wasn't perfect by any means. Then they go on the road to USC, to the LA Coliseum, and they absolutely get trounced, right? They lose 48-0. Bryson Barnes is 18 of 27 for 103 yards, 1 interception. His QBR was 9.5. That's not great. This is not going to be a slander on Bryson Barnes. That's not what I'm trying to get at. But I'm saying that this is a situation where Utah State's at where they're trying their best and their offense isn't clicking. Their defense is probably the highlight of their team and does well. And we'll get into a little bit of that, but it's still not to the level that they need. So that's kind of where they're at. They're coming off this loss, returning back to Logan, hoping that this in-state quote-unquote rivalry can be interesting. That they can do something to muck up the game. The last time Utah went up to Utah State, things were wild. Granted, Utah State had Chucky Keaton. Jordan Wynn got injured. I was there up on the top of the rooftop. They put me on top of there with all the bugs because they had their old press box and there was not enough seating for all of us. So it was a wild environment that night. I remember it vividly, but it was interesting. That is not this game. These are not the same teams. Utah is far better than they were back in 2012, and Utah State is not at that level that they were in 2012. They don't have Chucky Keaton out on the field who, say what you will about any of the other players around them, and they had some players. He was just going to do stuff with his feet that nobody could touch. And Utah at that time especially really struggled against dual-threat quarterbacks, and so it was a nightmare. This is not that situation. Bryson Barnes is not a dual-threat quarterback. He can run, as we've seen with Utah, but he's not a dual-threat quarterback. He's going to stay in the pocket and try to do whatever he needs to for the most part. Now, this offense, looking at it, just, high-level stuff, they're scoring, they're only scoring 18 points a game, and some of that is because they didn't score any against USC, so take that with a grain of salt. Some of these stats this early in the year are tough to paint. They're only averaging 195 yards in passing, which is actually higher than Utah for a Utah team that was expected to be much more pass-heavy this year. That's a number that kind of stands out and is a little shocking. Obviously, there's some nuance to that. I'm not going to get into that. Rushing, they're 75th, just a few spots lower than Utah, averaging 223 yards per game. I've documented that Utah needs to be better in the run game, so that doesn't necessarily come as a surprise. And total offense, they're 61st. They're averaging 418 yards per game, which is also a few spots higher than Utah. All of this is nuanced, right? I get it, but this is an offense that can move the ball. They have some players. It's just it's severely complicated by not having enough players. There's not enough depth. Their offensive line, which I'm going to get into in just a second. I'm sorry, I keep saying that I'm going to get into that, but they have some issues in coverage and pass protections and run protection, run blocking, and so it's a system that isn't quite equipped to handle a defense like Utah. USC's defense, which is much improved, they did really well against Utah State, and so this is kind of, I don't want to call it similar because I think Utah can create more havoc plays, but I think it's similar in the sense that you're going to face a tough defense that is going to do stuff to disrupt it, and that offense didn't do very well against USC, so Utah has a lot of potential there. Defensively, there are some standouts here on defense for Utah State, and specifically in the secondary. I think that's probably where they shine. Obviously, Ike Larson is kind of the guy that everybody's heard of. His name was linked to Utah when there was potential that he could go to the transfer portal. He's the star of the team, essentially, and a lot of people respect him. He's a strong safety, and he's going to make his name known out there and is going to do a lot. But he's not the only guy. There's a couple other guys that'll kind of create some problems and do things to limit Utah's passing game. However, with that said, the defense for Utah State, they're ranked 120th out of 134 teams in the country. They gave up on average 453 yards. Their passing is 113th. This is defense. Scoring defense 109th. Rushing defense is also 109th. This is a team that just isn't there, right? They're allowing teams to be able to score at a higher level than expected. Once again, a lot of that is going to be related to USC, which is just a load this year. So, I don't think they're as bad as this. I think it's going to average out a little bit, assuming that they can still play at a high level. I think this Utah State defense is much better than what these stats present right now. So take that with a grain of salt, but at the same time, this is a defense that isn't going to be anything like what Utah experiences. It's not even like what Baylor was last week, right? Baylor actually has a really good defense. Dave Aranda has great play calling. So it's a step down from where Baylor is at. But there are still opportunities here for this team, especially if they're going against a first-time quarterback. You've got different things that are going to mix there, right? How does that work if Isaac is able to beat this defense? That says a lot about what he's able to do, but this also isn't like this earth-shattering defense that you have to worry about in that regard. So a few more little stats, and we'll jump into kind of some of the keys to the game. First downs, they're only averaging 16.5 per game, which is 109th. Third down conversion, they're only getting 26% of those conversions for 124th. Fourth down conversions, they haven't converted any this year. Red zone conversions, this is the stat that is wild to me. And they're ranked 116th, but the real data there is that they've scored 66% of the time in the red zone, but those have only been field goals. They've been in the red zone 3 times, and 2 of them have been field goals, and they've not scored a touchdown in the red zone. So if you get them in the red zone this time, I'm curious to see how that translates if they can convert. But this is a team that is not quite there yet. They haven't been able to do whatever they need to do in the red zone. They're getting field goals, but it's not great. The real concern for Utah State is they're not even getting to the red zone, right? Of all these times, all these trips, they're not even able to do that. So the offense is struggling to move the ball. They're not getting a ton of first downs. They're not converting third downs at a high clip. And then if they do get into the red zone, they're only scoring field goals. Once again, only 2 games, but you'd have to imagine that if you were going up against an FCS team like Robert Morris, you'd see a little bit more of that. Granted, there can be big plays. You break one off for 30, 40, 50 yards, and that changes the dynamic of it. But so far, a team that hasn't really executed in the red zone, though the numbers are just really low. Penalties, they're the 121st most penalized team with 84.5 yards per game. They only average 1 sack per game. This is a team that they're trying. They're doing their best with what they've got, and right now it's not there. I don't think that's an indication of their interim head coach. I think it's really just a situation of where they're at. The transfer portal has been tough for Utah State, where they lose guys on the regular. And so it's a team that's trying to cobble together enough pieces, enough depth to be able to do what they need to. But that's the nature, honestly, of every G5 team out there. At least a majority of them, right? You're trying to fend off a lot of these Power 4 schools that are trying to get their players to come commit to them, and you're trying to cobble together a roster that fits. That's where Utah State is. Once again, good team, but not quite to the level that Utah should be at, right? Defensively, Utah alone should be able to keep this a good game for Utah. If the offense can move the ball and even score 10 points, I feel confident that Utah can get it done. Obviously, that's not a great situation to be in, but I think this is an offense that just doesn't have the firepower to do it. With that said, they do have a couple guys back there in Jalen Royals, wide receiver, dynamic wide receiver who can do a ton. Honestly, probably one of the best wide receivers in the state. He hasn't really produced a ton this year, but we've seen in years past what he's been able to do. 2 running backs that are pretty solid, Robert Briggs and Rashul Fasan. These are 2 guys that they can, they can break free. They can make some plays in the run game and do what they need to. But it's not somebody. These aren't players that necessarily are going to be full game changers for this Utah State team. I don't want to sit here and crap all over Utah State because I do think they're a good team. But this isn't the Utah State teams that we've seen in the past where they're challenging for a Mountain West title. There has been better rosters put together, but yeah, that's where it is. So looking at some of the keys to the game, assuming that Bryson Barnes starts, there's still some question as to whether he'll start. Spencer Petras is coming off of an injury, trying to get back into it. I would assume that it's Bryson Barnes just simply because it's tough to get back in kind of where you can be at comfortably with I believe it was an ankle injury for Petras, but we'll see. So I'm assuming that Bryson is starting. Now, with Bryson starting, that presents a great situation for Utah because you know him inside and out, right? If you're Utah State and Petros is able to go, maybe you kind of lean that way simply because you don't have a guy that has been schemed against the same way that you've schemed against Bryson Barnes. You know all of his flaws, you know all of his strengths, you know where he goes, you know his tendencies, all that stuff. Maybe that gives you an advantage to say, okay, we're not going to go with Bryson because of that. I don't know if teams, get too worried about that. They're going to play whoever they can play. That's just the nature of it. Even if they know a ton, I still think, even if they didn't know a ton about either of these quarterbacks, I still think Utah is in a good position here. So with Bryson, looking at kind of who he is, this is a situation where, and you saw this as when he was a Utah quarterback. If you put Bryson into pressure situations, he struggles much more than if he's not. And that's not a surprise. A lot of quarterbacks do. But Bryson, his grades, on PFF, they go significantly down when he's under pressure. For example, against USC, when he had a clean pocket, his grade was a 55.6. Still not great. It's still not a great number. For him to be a higher level quarterback, or at least be to the level where you want him to consistently beat teams, he's got to be at least in the 70-ish range, or at least contending in that, to be able to give you some confidence, and he's not there. When he's not blitzed, it's a 62.1. That changes when he's under pressure. When he's under pressure, that drops all the way to 35.4. He's not making the best reads. He's not handling that pressure very well. When he's blitzed, it's about the same at 35.8. So this is a quarterback, obviously, that if you can pressure him, you can do a lot of damage, or at least make him make mistakes, or cause some frustration. That's what USC did, and it worked tremendously. He only got 103 yards. This is not an easy situation for Bryson to handle, especially against a Utah defense that is going to want to go back there and get him. They've played against him for years. They understand it. There's going to be trash talking. There's going to be different things that way. They're not going to try to kill him because he's still their guy, but at the same time, he's the enemy right now. And so they're going to do whatever they can to exploit those weaknesses that they can. His best grades come out on screen passes, which doesn't, that shouldn't come as a surprise, simply because if he's being put under pressure situations, or he's doing things that he needs to get the ball out fast, those screen passes tend to be an easy pass for coaches to dial up, because you can get your blockers in front of you if you execute it right. And if you remember years ago when Utah would try to do screen passes all the time, it never worked out, because by the time the quarterback threw the pass, those running backs, those quarter or wide receivers, anybody that was put in that position to block, were getting blown up before the pass even got there, and so you'd lose a couple yards. That's just the nature of where Utah was at back then, and I remember hearing a lot of frustrations about the screen passes and everything. Utah's not quite there anymore. We don't see a lot of screen passes, but when they do, Utah's done a much better job of getting that. That was a side note. This is Bryson Barnes' specialty in terms of his highest grade. That's not his specialty in terms of like all that he does, but that's kind of where he's at. Screen passes, short passes. Short passes is his highest graded part of the field at 64.2. That's just kind of the nature of it. Get the ball out quickly. You don't want to be pressured. You're going to try to do different things that way. So if those linebackers especially can kind of roam the field well, can get what they need to there, Utah's generally going to be fine. He's not going to take a ton of shots downfield. Utah has the DBs to be able to lock that up, but a guy like a Jalen Royals can beat you and absolutely do some work there. He can get some yards after the catch. He can do a lot of things that can make you pay. But at the same time, if you can put pressure on Bryson Barnes, you should be able to be okay. So that's kind of the main takeaway from that aspect of it. Outside of that, to ways that you can get pressure. So another key to the game is to exploit the left side of the line. Their offensive line, it's still kind of being cobbled together. It's still kind of working together. Their best guys are their center and their right tackle. Outside of that, their left tackle, left guard, and right guard. So I'm going to stick more to the left side. They haven't done as well of a job in pass protection or in run blocking. So this becomes an area where, a guy like Connor O'Toole can really have some fun. He can put a lot of pressure there. If USC was causing some problems, you have to imagine what Utah's defensive line can do. They're just much more experienced. That's not to say USC's wasn't good. They've got some guys there, but you have to like what Utah can do. If you can put some pressure there, really make Bryson uncomfortable, as I mentioned, that changes the tone of the game. So that, to me, if, just looking at the numbers, this is, I'm not going to sit here and X's and O's stuff with you. That's just not my forte. But if you get into just the data alone, that's just kind of where you see that. Outside of that, you can take your shots in the passing game. So Isaac can take his shots. The secondary, as I mentioned, is experienced. They are talented. They have some of the higher coverage grades. Their NFL passer ratings are really low. That means that they're not allowing quarterbacks to get high percentage passes, and they're not completing that at a high level. But there's going to be a lot of opportunities in the middle of the field. Their linebackers, they're not too great in coverage. They have one that is actually really highly rated in coverage, and that's John Miller. But outside of that, everybody else gives up a ton. So this is where those tight ends especially can get into play, right? You've got a lot of guys that have a lot of talent. If Isaac is able to get to the ball to, a Brant Keithy or Caleb Lohner or any of these other guys that are big and physical, this becomes a great asset for Utah, where they can kind of get easy passes, because that's just, a few, short to mid-range yards, and then try to make some plays out of that, right? I think this is a situation where you can take your shots. I think, you still got your opportunities where you can, send Money down the field or Dorian down the field, and they're going to make their plays. Dorian's going to do that against any teams. It's just a matter of as if Isaac can hit him, and I believe that he can. We've seen it. I've seen it before, and I think that he has ability to do that. He loves to be able to take those deep shots and kind of show his arm strength. But this is an area where you don't have to necessarily be too I don't want to say creative, but you don't have to get too crazy, right? You can get those middle of the field stuff, assuming that's what Utah State presents, that what they have done in the first part of the game season. This becomes a great situation for Utah. So that's kind of a little bit about Utah State. We could go deeper into this, but I don't know that we need to. Just know that this is a team that is doing their best, right? They're trying to put together a respectable team in a situation that really just didn't benefit them. You have your head coach leave a month before, or not even a month before fall camp starts. There's a lot that's going, that makes it tough for them, and they love their head coach. They like how personable he is and kind of what he's able to do, but all that goes out the window on the field, right? And so it's a matter of, can you do that at a high level? And I just don't know that Utah State is there yet. I think Utah is obviously at a higher level. They should be at a higher level, even without Cam Rising under center. Utah should be able to be the favorite here pretty easily. So don't be surprised if it's not all perfect and Utah's just rolling up the score early on. I think this is a game that Utah and Utah State could be locked into a battle for quite a bit, and then Utah can potentially pull away. But the longer you allow a team like this to stay close, the harder it gets to pull away. That's not rocket science. I'm not over here spouting off some, Confucius stuff that is going to change the game. But I think it's just the nature of where this is. Utah has to attack early, kind of get them demoralized, take the fan base out of them, because Aggie Nation is loud. They love their team. They want to see nothing more than to upset an in-state team. And if you give a team like Utah State, that credit, that just makes for a lot more of a difficult situation for Utah. Yeah, you could point to Cam not being a game, but I once again, I don't think this is fully just on Cam. I think this is a situation where Utah can do enough to be able to get what they need to. And a lot of that will come on the defensive side of the ball. We'll see this Utah defense that's ready to go. But this is a team that should be able to go into Logan, handle their business, and be ready for Oklahoma State. But as I've mentioned before, you can't overlook Utah State. You've got to be able to stay in the moment. You've got to stay into this game. Oklahoma State will come, but this is where the true test for this Utah team is put together. Are they overlooking teams? Are they, playing down to their competition? Are they playing like the team that is expected to win the Big 12, or are they playing, different? I think that's the real challenge. And what we saw last week with even Notre Dame, it's easy to kind of feed into your own, press and think that you're this better team. I don't get that vibe from this team. Just talking to the players this week, they don't seem to get too high. They're not reading their own press clippings and thinking that everything's well. I think the way that last week's game ended against Baylor actually helps Utah in this game. I think had Utah, Cam stayed in, granted this would be a different conversation if Cam is still available, but I think in some ways that early test where you didn't dominate Baylor in terms of a score, the look and the feel of the game, I think that benefits Utah, where you're not coming into these games with this overwhelming sense of confidence and pride that you just kind of overlook some things and don't do what you need to. I think you can look at those games as a good early test where you can say Utah has still some things to work on. They're not quite this polished product yet, but you can also still recognize that they have tremendous talent and they can do what they need to dominate teams. So really curious about this game. Excited about it. Excited to see kind of how Aggie Nation and Logan kind of receives Utah. Curious to see if Utah can kind of put their stamp on the game early and really do what they need to. Also, it will be fun to see Bryson Barnes go up against Utah if he's the guy. I think that'll be a fun storyline that people want to see, but it's also a tough situation for him too to go against a team that they understand every aspect about him, being in that system. So it'll be a fun all around game. I'm excited to see it, but we'll get that, and then it turns into conference mode, and we'll go from there. And hopefully by next week, I'm hoping that I have my special guest that can join me and we can go and chat about some of these things and get a little deeper look into this, so you don't have to just listen to me the whole time, but you get to right now. So I appreciate all the support that I get from this, though. I appreciate you tuning in, listening, and I hope that I'm able to present some information that gives you some insight into this game and kind of what's going on with the Utah football program. So with that, we'll call it a day, and we'll get to game day and see what happens, and we'll have some fun and chop this up on Monday and see how the game went. But with that, signing off, have a great day and enjoy the weekend.